Imagine a perfect Sunday afternoon. The date the 10th of August, 1628, the harbor of Stockholm, Sweden's capital, is packed with people. Rich or poor, everyone stands on the seashore, jostling for a glimpse. They've all come to witness a spectacle that will change history. Floating in the water is a ship the likes of which the world has never seen before. Its name is the Vasa. It is decorated with gold and red paint and is carved with hundreds of statues of Roman emperors and Greek gods, glittering in the sunlight. Inside are 64 bronze cannons enough firepower to single-handedly raze any European city to the ground. This wasn't just a ship, it was the ultimate proof of Sweden's coming golden era. But that crowd, those happy children and dancing people, didn't know that they weren't witnessing a celebration, but a funeral. The sea was calm, the wind was barely there, and there were no enemies nearby. Yet, this royal journey had just begun. 20 minutes it had even occurred to us that this world's most powerful ship was defeated by its own weapon, without a shot fired, without a battle. Vasa, on its very first voyage, just 1 mile from the shore, the door sank into the depths of the ocean. That day not only wood and iron would sink, but 30 lives she fell silent forever. The question is, what exactly happened that day? How did an engineering marvel become the world's biggest engineering disaster? To get to the root of this tragedy, we'll have to delve into the closed rooms of the royal palace, far from the sea. This story involves two powerful forces colliding. On one side was a king's stubbornness and ambition, and on the other, the eternal laws of physics. History shows that whenever humans clash with physics, physics always wins. In the 17th century, Sweden was on its way to becoming a superpower. The king of that time, King Gustavus Adolphus, known as the Lion of the North, was fighting a long and exhausting war with Poland. To rule the seas, he needed not just a ship, but a terror weapon, a weapon that would strike fear into the hearts of the enemy. The king ordered the construction of the Vasa, but his demands were constantly changing. First, he asked for a normal-sized ship, but then he felt that this was not enough. He ordered the ship to be made longer. And then came the biggest mistake that sealed the Vasa's fate. The king said that this ship should have 2 enclosed gun decks. In those days, even the largest ships had only 1 gun deck. 2 decks meant double weight, and that too on the upper part of the ship. In engineering terms, this was playing with the center of gravity. At the Stockholm shipyard, where this ship was being built, the atmosphere was one of fear. Henrik Ebertsen, the master shipbuilder, fell ill and died midway through the project. The project was now in the hands of his inexperienced assistants. Workers could see that the timber fittings were not right. The ship was too narrow for its height. Imagine a skyscraper building with a very small base. Even a slight breeze could topple it. But the king was constantly sending letters from the battlefield in Poland. Send the ship quickly, and humans are needed. The pressure was so intense that no one stopped to consider whether the ship was even fit to sail. The Navy was desperate, and the crew was just hoping their leaders knew what they were doing. We have arrived summer of 1628. The ship was ready, standing in the water, but the danger was clear. Sofring Hansen is an experienced sailor and felt something strange just looking at the ship. A few weeks before launch, he decided to conduct a secret stability test. This was a standard test in which 30 crew members were called to the deck. The order was given, run. Those 30 men ran from the left side of the ship to the right side. The aim was to shake the ship and see how quickly it would straighten back up. When they ran the first time, the ship tilted. When they ran back, the ship tilted even more. The third time, the ship tilted so much that it seemed it would roll over right back on the dock. Standing below ice, Admiral Klask Fleming the king saw this sight and was frightened and cried out, "Stop! For God's sake, stop him! Otherwise, he will drown here." The test was stopped right there. Everyone, every sailor and officer present, knew that Vasa was top-heavy. The weight of the top was too much, but Admiral Fleming didn't have the courage to tell King that his dream project had failed. He chose silence, and that silence proved to be his biggest mistake. Now, let's take a look at the timeline of that last day. Date, August 10th, 1628. 3 o'clock in the afternoon. The weather is clear. The wind is blowing from the southwest, but it's very light, barely a breeze. Captain Hansen orders the crew to get ready. Since this was their first voyage and the risk was considered low, the crew was allowed to bring their wives and children along. There were women and small children on board, standing on deck and waving to the people on shore. For them, it was a picnic, but fate had other plans. 4 o'clock in the evening, the ship was brought into the open waters of the harbor. The captain ordered the sails to be raised. 4 large sails flew into the air. At this point, another fatal decision was made. The king wanted to show his power to the world. So, the captain ordered a gun deck. The ports were opened. Just a few feet above the surface of the water, those black square holes opened up, and from them gleaming bronze caps poked out. It was a show-off, a call to death. Las 4:15 p.m. Vasa moves forward. A salute is fired. The sound of cannon fire reverberates throughout Stockholm. Everything seems normal. But then, a gust of wind comes from the cliffs of Sikdermem. It wasn't a storm, just a normal breeze, but it was enough for Vasa. The ship tilted to its port side. The crowd gasped for breath. The crew scrambled to the high side. Slowly, the ship straightened back, upright. The captain breathed a sigh of relief. But that wasn't the last of the wind. 4:20 p.m. Another gust of wind came, a little stronger than before. Vasa tilted again, but this time, ... He couldn't stop. The heavy cannons mounted aloft began pulling the ship down. Gravity had taken over. The gun ports that had been open for show-off had now become the door to death. The ship tilted so much that water began pouring into those open holes. Once the water went in, the game was over. Thousands of gallons of water began filling the lower deck. There was chaos inside the ship. Imagine the scene. Heavy iron and wooden objects began to slip. Cannons that weren't properly fastened broke free from their mounts and fell all over the deck, crushing people. Stairs had become walls. D-ware had become floors. Captain Hansen and the crew shouted, "Lower the sails! Close the ports!" But time had run out. Vasa wasn't drowning, ... He was just laying down exhausted. For those inside, the world turned upside down and then plunged into darkness. The crowd standing on the shore was stunned. They couldn't understand what they had just seen. The ship that had stood majestically a minute earlier. The next minute, only its masts were sticking out of the water, like the marks of a grave. Vasa was at the mouth of the harbor. Only 32-meter he sat in the deep water. It was so close to shore that a good swimmer could swim to it. Small boats rushed to help. Debris was floating everywhere in the water topies. Pieces of wood, barrels, and logs. Captain Hansen somehow survived. He was pulled under when the ship capsized, but miraculously managed to pull himself out of the water. But those below decks had no way to escape. The pressure of the water and falling furniture proved fatal for them. 250. Many were killed that day. Among them were experienced sailors and innocent women and children who had come just for a picnic and lost their lives for no fault of theirs. When the news reached the king in Poland, his anger reached its peak. He was told that his invincible warship had been sunk without a single shot being fired. He immediately ordered, "I want the culprit. Someone will be punished." A high court convened in Stockholm. The captain was jailed. He was asked, "Why didn't you control the ship?" "Was the crew drunk?" the captain said. "I did what was standard procedure." Cannons was tied, the crew was conscious, and the sails were set correctly. Then the shipbuilders were called into the courtroom. "Why did you make the ship so narrow and unstable?" They replied timidly, "We followed the same dimensions that the king himself sent. If we had changed them, we would have broken the king's orders." And that was the truth. No single person was responsible for this accident. Everyone was responsible, but fear, the fear of appeasing the king, the fear of telling the truth. In the end, the court did not punish anyone. They said it was God's will, and the file was closed. Vasa was left to drown there in the sea. But Vasa's story did not end there. 333 years until Vasa slept in cold, black, and salty water. Tevaltixea's water is so cold and so low in oxygen that wood-eating insects shipworms couldn't survive there. So Vasa didn't age. She remained just like that, trapped in time, waiting. In the 1950s, a stubborn amateur archaeologist, Anders Fransen, decided to look for it. After years of hard work and searching the seabed with grappling hooks, in 1956, he found something. He pulled a black, wet piece of wood from the seabed. He had found Vasa. April 24th, 1961. The eyes of the entire world were once again on Stockholm. This time, the ship was not sinking, but rather floating. Through a complex salvage operation, people were stunned as the gas was lifted out of the water. 98% intact, the statues on it, the caps, even the crew's clothes and their belongings. Everything was the same. Today, Vasa Sestase is housed in a custom-built museum in Stockholm. It's the only 17th century ship in the world that we can still see. When you stand in front of this ship, you don't just see wood and iron. You see human pride. You can see the places where sailors sailed, the carvings that were made to intimidate the enemy but never saw battle. Vasa teaches us that no matter how powerful a king you are, you can never compromise the laws of physics. The ship that was once Sweden's greatest embarrassment has now become their greatest pride and tourist attraction. But when you look at those open gun ports, remember, sometimes the greatest strength becomes the greatest weakness. Stockholm Sea is calm today, but deep down history still remembers the day when the wind blew a little and a sea protector came to his knees.